Welcome to the AcuProsper podcast, where we get smart, real, honest, and empowered about creating a thriving acupuncture clinic. I'm Katie Altnew, your host. I'm an acupuncturist, herbalist, and ABORM certified fertility acupuncturist with a clinic in Denver, and I'm the founder of AcuProsper, which is my side passion project where I teach acupuncturists how to start, grow, and market their acupuncture clinics. And I'm the author of the book, Acupuncturists Mean Business. In season 2 of this podcast, it's all about passing the mic to others, specifically to a few of the many acupuncturists out there that I admire and feel inspired by. We are going to get a look inside their journeys, their practices, struggles, mindset, marketing, and more. We're getting real and we are having some hard and honest conversations about everything from burnout to cultural appropriation. My goal is to show that there are many paths up the mountain, that there's not one singular definition of success or way to get there, and to break down the taboos about discussing business in our healing field and our livelihood. If you'd like to see the video version of this podcast, you can find it on the blog at acuprosper.com. And it is pretty cool to see these acupuncturists' faces light up as they talk about their practices and their passion. Thank you for being here and for making this a safe space to share and explore these journeys and ideas. I hope it shows us what's possible and helps us to feel connected and supported. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hey guys, so I want to introduce you to today's guest. We have Rhonda Coleman here. She is an acupuncturist. She has her DAOM, and she recently moved from Denver to Tucson, and she is the founder of Blacupuncturist, her acupuncture clinic. She also works at Sierra Tucson as an acupuncturist. And she's also the vice president of Blacupuncturist.org. So I'm so excited to have you here today, Rhonda. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first, what I'd like to do is just ask you about your journey, what it was like, how you became an acupuncturist, what it was like growing your practice, what you're doing now, what you're up to. And then I'd like to ask you about your involvement in Blacupuncturist.org. Yeah. So Will you tell us about how you became an acupuncturist and what it was like growing your practice and what your practice is like now?
Yeah, so it was a pretty windy road. There wasn't a direct route to me becoming an acupuncturist. I talk with a lot of young people and older people right now say that there's no way that I could plan to be an acupuncturist. I never heard of an acupuncturist in my community growing up. So it was never anything that was presented as you can be this when you grow up. So I started off in martial arts. That was like my introduction into healing work, because there's a healing component to all movement, I believe. And from there, I went into personal training and then ended up doing massage therapy after that. And those two things combined gave me a little bit of a foundation in nutritional therapy and internal health. And after a few years doing massage therapy and just getting feedback from people that I spoke with, I'm a natural educator. So I talk to people about what I know and help them to have better understanding for themselves. I just realized at some point that I needed more education to help people further than I was able to with the level of education that I was at. And so I actually started school for dietary nutrition because that was, a strong focus of mine, something that I thought was really important for overall health, still do. And in the program, there was a course that I took that was called Survey of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And in that class, I started reading more about Ayurvedic medicine and naturopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine. And then I came across the section about traditional Chinese medicine, which again, I had never heard of. And as I was reading all the different components of it, realized it was everything I never knew I wanted to be. So there was a nutritional component in it. There was massage in it with Tui Na. There was this internal medicine diagnosis, and then all of the herbology. And my family has a strong history with herbs. And so that resonated with me the internal medicine diagnosis resonated because my mother had always pushed for me to go into medicine. I was just strongly opposed to my understanding of what medicine was from, this country's approach to medicine. It's not something that I have a positive relationship with. And so seeing that just immediately grabbed me at the spirit level. And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I went into acupuncture school shortly after that. I ended the program that I was in after applying and learning that I could transfer my credits over and go into the master's program in Colorado. At that time, I was in New Orleans. So I moved to Colorado to go to Colorado School of Traditional Chinese Medicine and began studying. Funny story, when I read in this book about traditional Chinese medicine, and that was kind of the bulk, and I looked up a little bit more about the different components, but I saw, internal medicine diagnosis and system of medicine, and then there were all these little sub paragraphs about the herbology, and then Tui-Na and cupping and acupuncture and moxibustion. So I had no idea that we were going to spend 3 years sticking each other with needles. And I went in not liking needles at all and very upset that there was
the focus.
Almost stale. Yes.
So
I'm beyond
funny.
that now. I love it. I think it's amazing. But I did not go into the program with that understanding. And then growing my practice, you had a really important role in that. You didn't bring up, former student, but you taught the business class the year that I was in school.
I still remember your presentation. You know how you said you were a natural educator? I still remember the talk you gave in my class. It was like a nutrition. You were you were pretending like you were delivering it to kids. And it was such a really good talk. So I'm like, you are totally a natural educator. Yeah. So you just said so much good stuff. So I just wanted to hit pause and because I think there's a lot of things you said that are really relatable. I love how you said it was everything you never knew you wanted to do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a good way to say that. I can totally relate to that. I think a lot of people probably can. And I think probably inherent in being an acupuncturist is being a natural educator, right? So much of what we do, that empowerment. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
But no problem.
Keep going on your journey.
No, it's good. It gave me time to go over again the questions that you posed, because I don't always do well at multiple points in one. I usually need them 1 or 2 at a time.
Totally sorry.
But I think I'm on a good track right now, and we're to the point where I need to share about starting my practice. Right?
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
So my practice was in Aurora, Colorado. And I actually started on paper my practice in your business class when you gave tips on how to get started. I had my laptop out and I was like, let me just knock this out right now. And so I already had my business name idea and typed that in. And so I was off and running right out of school. I took all of the board exams while I was still in school, because I knew that I could not afford to be out of school and not making any money. So I called and talked to whoever I needed to talk to, how much of this can I do before graduation? And I took the exams. Those were lined up. I worked with Dora and had every piece of the application that they needed submitted except the transcripts and the what else did they needed the transcripts showing that I completed the program at CSTCM, and I think they needed something from the NCC AOM, but because I'd done the boards, that was on the way. So I ended up being the first person in my class to get my license, and it was a little less than 2 weeks after graduation. I was licensed and practicing.
There you go.
So I started practicing right away. I took a bad turn and went the Groupon route to try and get my name out there. Do not recommend it at all. And so what I ended up doing was, to grow the practice, was just a lot of community work. And since my comfort level is within the Black community. That's where I did a lot of like my in-person kind of marketing. And it wasn't even intentional marketing. I would just go to events that were happening and, you know, people would ask, oh, where'd you move here from and what do you do? And when I would explain what I did, I had to often do this speech about, you know, why the needles aren't going to hurt, because a lot of people in the Black community, the first response is like, oh, that's cool, but I don't want to be stuck with needles.
Totally.
And so I had to do a lot of reconnecting. So a lot of my work in community has to do with using language that allows community members to be able to connect with the medicine first, that this is not an other thing, that this is something that is part of our birthright and lineage. Because, you know, I had a lot of talks at the doctoral level with my professors about the erasure of sub-Saharan African contribution to anything in the world. Right now, any school you go to, there's talk about how Asia contributed to our world, how Europe contributed, but there's no contribution from sub-Saharan African people, even through Egypt, where we know now that the people that were there during the time of the pyramids and pharaohs were more likely the Nubian people. It's still not shared that the innovation that happened, like that there was any influence or any input from sub-Saharan African people, right?
So you're saying not just in medicine, but in like
not just in medicine, there's erasure across the board. And so when you think about that, it's unrealistic that every group of people in the world had a contribution, but not those people, right? Because it wouldn't make sense for the contributions that we see present day from Black people. It just wouldn't make sense, right? So I just introduced the concept that there's no way that there was no contribution. And a lot of what has been stored and held so greatly by the Chinese people. And so I give them mad props because they were able to maintain their history for so many thousands of years. It wasn't burned, it wasn't taken or destroyed. Maybe some of it was, but they maintained a lot of it. But we know, and they know, even though it's not always taught here, that a lot of what they practice and what was retained did come across through the silk trade. And that was contributions from many peoples. And that's why you see some similarities in Ayurvedic medicine and even in some old European practices, because all of those people were converging and sharing their knowledge, including people from sub-Saharan Africa, even though it's not documented that they had any contribution. And so we know that there is evidence of people using sharp tools, plants in other parts of the world. So acupuncture is not something that was isolated in China or even in Asia, right? Herbology, we know, is used everywhere. And so I introduced this concept in the community that, you know, your great grandmothers probably talked about root medicine, talked about using herbs, talking about all of these things, right? And then there's head nodding, you know, there's a connection to that. And there's, you know, hands-on healing. You know that there was touch healing in your lineage. Yes, that makes sense. All people figured out that they could massage and manipulate and use different areas on the body to improve wellness. And so acupuncture is just one tool in this whole system of medicine. And so now I have them accepting that I can contribute something to their lives. I can help them in some way. They can at least use the herbs. And I talk to them. I use language like I very carefully and very lovingly place these metal devices on different points of your skin. I'm not doing anything to you, right? I'm placing these devices in specific points that I know will encourage your body to respond in a certain way. And so then it changes from I'm getting stuck to
like it's not being done to me, but like I'm part of it. I love how you said that. Lovingly placing these devices.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. But
and I just want to,
so a lot of my work is that.
I love that. And I want to read it or like kind of dig into what you said before, where it sounded like when you first would go to your community and share what you do, their first reaction often was not just about fear of needles, but also like, well, where do I fit into that? That's not for someone like me. And you had to kind of connect them to it and say, actually, our history as a people, like totally has a place in this sort of like holistic method, natural methods of healing.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah. I think that's a really, such a really important point for a lot of different communities. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, I do the same in the Latino community too. I don't know if we've ever talked about the fact that my family's from Honduras.
No,
And so, I'm Afro-Latina. And so I do talk to even my family and other people from, Central and South American countries about their own roots in herbal medicine. So my mom, when I first said I was going into acupuncture school, she was like, like she was not feeling it. And I had family members talk about, woo-woo medicine, or even go so far as to say, that's witchcraft or brujeria, that kind of language. And so for my mom, I had to specifically mention, Grandpa did herbs all the time. Like he was always making this root drink called gifiti, which is like it cures 100 ailments is what it kind of translates to. And she always had fever grass, which I did not learn until well into my 30s, that fever grass that I grew up with is lemongrass.
Oh, yeah.
I smelled it in the store and I was like, oh, this is fever grass, and just all these other like pretty common kitchen herbs, and then some that are more local to Honduras that she would have growing and that she would use if we were ill. Like, this is just learning more about that. And now she's a fan, but she was not a fan. And she was definitely on the side of, you're not sticking me with no needles.
My mom too.
Yeah. And now she tells everyone why they should get acupuncture. Oh,
I love that.
Too bad my daughter doesn't live here. You need some acupuncture.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. So I kind of want to come back and touch on this a little bit later. I think what you just said is going to be an answer to a question I want to ask you later, but I want to continue with the route you were on. So you were saying that you tried Groupon and it like didn't work because then people were like expecting a discount from you and like crowding out your schedule basically. And so what really helped you was just like going into your community and really just like authentically connecting with people. You weren't like purposefully like marketing to them. You were just showing up.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, correct.
And then how did it go? What was your practice like here in Denver before you moved?
Yeah, so it was pretty good. So I had a good mix of people that would come. I'm pretty personable. So every time I met people, then I ended up having more patients, more clients. And so that was really good. I think for me, I felt a little, what's the phrase? I can't think of it now. Bittersweet. I felt a little bittersweet about it because when I went into school, the more I learned, the more I realized, wow, like my community really needs this. And at that time, I was thinking about my community in New Orleans, where I grew up. Like so many people needed to hear the things that I was hearing in school because it immediately resonated with me as a truth, I often in my talks remind people, and I don't remember like if this was some kind of scripture in the Bible or where I heard this, but there's something somewhere that's written that each of us has the truth, the universal truth inscribed on our souls, right? So that when we encounter it, we recognize it as truth. Yeah. And so all throughout school, I kept having these moments where I was receiving information, but it didn't feel like new information ever. It always just felt like confirmation of something that I already knew, but didn't have the words to articulate. Does that make sense?
I felt that way too.
Yes. And so I was like, my community needs this. I couldn't go back to New Orleans though. Like I've grown to a place that I don't feel like I fit there quite. And I still would love to go back there at some point after my kids don't need me anymore, because that's also not a place I feel like I want to raise my kids right now. So anyway, I wanted to give back to my community, and if not the one I grew up in, another one that's similar, to share what I was learning. And so the bittersweet was that while I was able to educate a lot of people, and there were a few that would come in, there was still the larger majority that would just be like, oh, I'm going to come, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what was great about that was that they would tell other people that they should come, you know, but they would say it in a way that made it sound like they were already coming. Oh, Dr. Coleman's so great. You really need to go and see her. She's amazing. She does all this stuff that's going to help us. We really need to support her. And so I had all of these voices saying the same thing, but they weren't always coming in.
Yeah, I love that though. They trusted you and knew you were great just because they knew you, even if they hadn't received like official treatment from you.
Mm-hmm.
They could still totally vouch for you. Yeah.
Yes.
And you were.
So that happened a lot. And so I was treating people, but it wasn't necessarily the people that I really wanted to serve. And I have to be careful with that because I feel like I did serve them in that I did have some influence and I did educate them, and there were changes in how they looked at their health. And I get questions all the time. I still get emails and texts from people in Denver that are, you know, just reaching out because they have a question about their health. What should they do? What can they take? But it didn't always turn over into getting them on the table to receive acupuncture. And so maybe part of that is my own work, that I need to accept that I did what I was supposed to do in sharing with them and educating them and helping them grow in that way. And that maybe it wasn't for me to always have each of those people on my table. Maybe they'll end up on your table at some point because the seed has been planted. So
Right.
I take back what I said about the bittersweet. I did good work there.
Yeah.
I would have loved to do more, but I had to get out. It was the cold, and the cold chased me away.
Totally. And now you're in Arizona, in Tucson.
Yes.
Cool.
And so I'm starting a practice here, but it's literally, I set up the office maybe a week and a half ago.
Oh, wow. So
great.
And so you're like reinventing, are you like totally reinventing the way you practice, your practice, like your whole identity?
Business name, all of that. Awesome. So I've been going by Blacupuncturist since school, and all of my social media handles were that. And I got encouragement from people over the years that, you know, oh, why isn't that your name? Like, that's so much more clear. I was previously Water Mama Acupuncture, and there was always questions about, well, what does that mean? And why is that the name? Mm-hmm. And there's never any question with Blacupuncturist. They're like, of course, like that makes sense. So that's the practice that I'm building now. And I'm also working part-time at another facility doing acupuncture, Sierra Tucson, as you mentioned.
Yeah, so cool. And that's kind of like a month-long sort of rehab facility.
Yes.
Fancy rehab facility.
It is pretty fancy. It's a beautiful rehabilitation center. They treat mood disorders, PTSD and trauma, addictions, food. I can't remember how they phrase it, but I feel like they don't say food or eating disorder. Maybe that's like not the word du jour to use or phrase, you know. So I love it because it's a beautiful facility, and so people are pretty happy to be working in that space. And it's kind of like, I had a nonprofit in Denver too called the Healing Garden. And it feels like if the Healing Garden could have gotten the funding that I wanted, that place would be a strong representation of how it could have functioned. So there are naturopathic doctors working alongside MDs and psychiatrists and psychologists and acupuncturists, somatic therapists, sound therapy, just everything, massage therapy, Reiki, everyone is there. There's full staff nursing around the clock, and it's just a gorgeous place.
Truly integrative, it sounds like. Yeah, I want to go there and get all those things.
Right?
Yeah, sounds awesome. Yeah. Well, that's neat. And so I love that you decided to go like all in with that identity of Blacupuncturist. And can I ask you like just a questions about that. So when I
Sure.
hear that, I think like, oh, it's what it makes me think of is how there's not a lot of Black acupuncturists, at least in Denver, my area. I've taught that class for like almost 10 years and seen the like graduating class and have not had many Black acupuncture students. So is that like part of why it became a big part of your identity, because it does make you really unique, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm also, yeah, so like can we talk about that? Can we talk about what it
No,
was like to be a Black person in acupuncture school even, and maybe also the,
yeah.
yeah, that first.
Yeah, no, in school, definitely. Like I said, there was a lot of things that resonated when I was in school, and I would hear the Chinese professors talking about their experiences. I kept getting like this discomfort because they would compare often, like, in China, this is how we do things. And in America, this is how Americans do things. And so I said multiple times throughout schooling, man, I'm just sounding more and more Chinese, because what she would describe as the way that Americans are did not describe me, the people that I grew up around, my upbringing, none of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's already known in the Black community anyway. Like, we have inside jokes constantly about, what's presented as American culture, and we just don't fit into what is presented to the world. In fact, I've traveled internationally a lot, and people are always shocked and often telling me that, no, you can't be from America because you don't seem like, what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the portrayal
like,
of what an American is, like that's because it's not really diversely represented. Like, yes, there are Black people shown, but even when I look at movies and things, I'm like, well, that's still not my experience. That just seems like, a Black actor portraying what this same kind of storyline of what the American is, right? So anyway, that's one aspect of being a Black person in the acupuncture school. I felt not represented. I felt like I didn't really have a place to fit because, one, my classmates didn't look like me. And then two, the stories that were being shared like didn't include me because I'm not Chinese, but I didn't fit this narrative of what the American outlook on life is, or way of being in the world is, or, you know what I mean? The stories that were, it was very like just two-sided, and there was no space for me. So that was one thing. And then I volunteered at least once at the Dragon Boat Festival for the school, for CSTCM, and I suggested that they try and pass out some flyers in different areas where there would be more Black voice, and it seemed like there wasn't interest in doing that. I invited the school when I was for 2 years. I headed the health highway for the Colorado Black Arts Festival, which is huge and like many years in the running. And I was like, you all can have a discounted booth in this health highway area, and you can promote the school so that we can get more diversity in the student body. And they passed both years on showing up there. And so I'll go back to that. I never heard of this growing up in school. And so a child can't imagine doing something that's never been presented to them. Right. And even as those children grow into teenagers and young adults, they still can't imagine doing or being something that's never been presented as an idea for them. And unfortunately, in this country, when traditional Chinese medicine does show up, like in media, movies, and whatever, it's not always properly presented, or it's presented in a comical kind of way, like 1,000 needles in somebody's back and they fall off the table, or it's somewhere in the background. It's not often presented in a way that would make someone be like, oh, look, there that is again in this movie, and that looks so cool. I want to do that. I want to be that. It's something that's, unless you're paying really close attention to, you can miss it in the blink of an eye. So
and not see yourself in it.
Not see yourself in it at that. And so the experience is that this is something that is either belongs to China, or it belongs in some ritzy, swanky place where white people are wearing flowing pants and saying namaste, and it's
Right.
not something that is for us or for our community, because we're not going to put on put on this whole demeanor and be that, because it's uncomfortable. And that's not to say that no one does, because I've met plenty of Black people that do have that presentation of themselves, but it's not the majority, and it's not what most people would find comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I feel like a little bit what you're touching on is also like maybe the whitewashing of wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And like it feels like when you were saying like the namaste culture and things like that, like
which I recognize is not white culture, by the way. I want to make clear
totally
that
it's like yoga,
yes,
but like these days that's been whitewashed too. Like that's part of it's like it's part of it. And I mean, I guess it seems like it's been holistic health has been like largely marketed towards like rich white women, especially with social media in the last few years. It's just like it seems like it's taking hold in that community, but our medicine can be so powerful for everyone. And so it's a real shame. And what do you think that we can do to better serve other communities?
I think it's already in the works. So maybe at the conference 3 years ago for Integrative Medicine for the Underserved, that topic came up about that whitewashing, right? And there was a keynote speaker, and she brought up slides of, when you search for wellness, all of these pictures of white people in like yogic poses come up. And then after that, you'll start seeing like photos of nature. And these were slides that she created from Google searches. So you'd first see all these white faces, and then you would see like stones, like river stones, or sand at the beach, or bamboo, or trees blowing in the wind. And then after that, you would see animals. Right?
Before even people of color. Wow.
You would see all of that. And then way down low, you might start seeing Asian people, and then Indian, that's Asian people of different countries, right? But no Black people. And so I feel like since that happened, and I've gone and done the Google searches, like that word must have traveled. It must have flowed out of that conference, and people made some changes, and like, oh, there aren't any pictures. And so now if I search for wellness, I will see a lot more diversity in the photos that come up on Google. But the same was true for mindfulness, right? If you searched mindfulness or wellness on Google, there were no pictures of any people of color until like pages down. So that's one thing that can continue to improve, like having representation through imagery. I think that people that create other forms of media can really help, because, we are a culture that looks to television and social media and whatever else to tell us who we're supposed to be or how we're supposed to be, right? Especially for young people. But then also, schools need to do their work in reaching out when they're doing their marketing. They need to be more diverse in how they're targeting zip codes for who's going to be interested, and stop deciding that, well, there's no Black people coming in our schools, so that means that they're not interested in learning this. Right.
That seems like a really good point. It starts there. People going to school.
You have to invite people if you want them to show up. You can't, have a party, cater it, and don't send out any invitations and say, oh, I guess no one wanted to eat. You have to send the invitations out. And so that's a big part. But also in the way that NADA, National Acupuncture Detoxification Association, I forgot to mention that I'm a registered trainer with them. And
cool.
I've been told several times, make sure you let people know. And so they are doing a lot of work to undo the erasure that happened specifically in that organization around the history of community acupuncture in this country. POCA came out of the work that NADA started, or those founding members that were part of the Black Panthers and the Young Lords. Like, that stuff is coming back in. It's totally understandable that people wanted to distance themselves from the attacks that were happening from the federal government on those people. But at the same time, I feel like they kind of left people in the wind and didn't fight hard enough and, use their voices at that time. But that's a whole other thing, right? So
but it's an interesting piece of that history of like NADA protocol and the Black Panthers. And people might not know that.
Right. So hopefully people are learning. There's great documentaries and great information coming out. NADA has a lot going on their web series, like the history of NADA, where they're bringing that knowledge in. And so I think in the way that they are kind of pioneering this, step up and say, we messed up and we took this out, let's put it back in. I think that acupuncture schools need to do the work. Someone should be doing research somewhere, or a bunch of people should be doing research to go out and find out why there's so much exclusion of sub-Saharan African peoples to, the innovations that exist in our world from the past that are still present now. And the excuses of, well, there's nothing documented are old. We already know that a lot of those people had oral histories, but we also know that where there was documented history, that the schools, like the school at the University of Alexandria, was burned down. They know that there were contributions from sub-Saharan people there. It's still not talked about mainstream. You have to pay to go to a college course to hear the professors talk about that. That information needs to be more publicly shared so that it's accessible. And people need to start putting together the pieces that exist very plainly to show those contributions so that people feel connected to it and want to retrace their steps to be part of that roots, part of that lineage, part of that birthright.
That sounds so interesting to me. I want somebody to write a book and make a movie or something, because it sounds like really interesting history that I would want to know more about. Did you say that you did your doctorate, thesis on this or research on this?
My doctoral research was a survey on barriers to holistic health in the Black community.
Awesome.
And I localized it to the Denver metro area. And basically the responses were about, not having the information. So not being aware of the benefits of traditional Chinese medicine and some of the other therapies. People know, I can go get chiropractic because I was in a car accident. But a lot of people don't know beyond that the benefits of chiropractic medicine. So also don't know the benefits of traditional Chinese medicine or massage therapy besides it feeling good. And so one piece was education. It's not included in our standard health education, so people don't know. And then the other bigger parts were outside of funding, seeing a provider that they trusted. And so I got a lot of verbal confirmation from people. I always had questions about acupuncture, but I didn't want to sound stupid, but I feel comfortable asking you. And so because of who I am, because of my presentation, people felt comfortable asking me questions that they might not feel comfortable asking you, for example, right? Yeah. I feel safe asking you about what it is that you do and how it can help me. And I feel like you'll give me an answer that I'll be able to understand and that I'll be able to trust. So,
and that's like the perfect segue into how you're on the board of the Black Acupuncturist Association, right?
Yes.
Because that's helping people find Black providers that they would feel comfortable and safe with, right? Can we hear it from you? Will you tell us about the mission and what it does and why you guys started it?
No, absolutely. And I would like to say that we will be discussing this in depth at this year's Integrative Medicine for the Underserved conference.
Cool. I didn't know that was a conference. That's
yes,
too.
It's an amazing organization. Just slight segue. I was on their board too. I'm on hiatus now, but amazing organization that is trying to do work to improve health in underserved communities. They're working on changing the language to not say underserved, but that's where it's at right now.
Yeah.
And so we're presenting at that conference on Saturday. I believe it's September 26th at 1:30 to 2:30 p.m.
So do you buy a ticket to the conference? And
yes, you go to IM4 us, IM4US.org. And you can get conference tickets there.
Okay, cool. I'll link to that.
Yeah, it's an amazing organization.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just a small group of all women, unfortunately, because even within the Black community, the percentage of acupuncturists are majority female. Like, you know, in overall, it's majority women, right? In this country, at least.
Yeah.
And so we're just a small group of women, and there's constant conversations about we should have a database so that we can find each other and so that we can refer family members and friends and everyone else to each other when necessary. And that evolved to, you know, well, we also need scholarships so that more people can, you know, try to get into school because it's super expensive. And we also need mentorship so that we know, you know, what works and how we can implement this in our communities. Like what kinds of things should we look for? What do we say? How do we get people on board? And sharing knowledge and information. So it grew from just simply needing a directory to we need support. And the best support we can give is to each other, and then uplift the community from there. So yeah, that's how it started. And
so it came from that. So one organization grew out of the other. That's neat to know.
No, we didn't. No. It was just, there were a lot of voices in our social media group saying that we needed this directory. And then there were other chimes that would come up of, you know, this is also necessary. And so the women that are involved in kind of founding the organization, we just were like, well, let's just do it. And so we put out a call, like, whoever wants to help do this, let's do the work. Yeah. And you know, usually when the hard work piece comes, there's not always a whole lot of people that step up for that. Like, they want to see it happen, but not necessarily put their hands in the dirt to do it. And so we're working together to try and get it going. And we know that once things are formed and there's structure in place and work is actually happening, that we'll get more people coming on board. And so part of trying to continue the work forward is speaking up at this conference to hopefully get more support there, and see how quickly and how strong we can continue to grow. Yeah, something came up that I would love to elaborate more on if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was talking about like the funding. And so I've had conversations with a lot of people that it was really hard for me to get my business up and off the ground. And I had to go to Groupon because I needed that fast money that did come in the beginning, in like the first 3 to 4 months before I shut it off. Because often there's not like family money to start a business. Most of my classmates, when I finished, you know, either had money from family, whether it was given directly for their acupuncture practice, or they had previously been given money that they then invested, that then grew, or they had a previous business that they closed and they took the money from that. They all had money to start their practice. One friend was like, oh yeah, my bank gave me a $30,000 loan. And I was just like, what? How do you even do that? Like, I can barely get a bank to give me a $1,500 loan, and I have to answer all kind of questions, and they want to look through all my stuff for $1,500. Like, and that's not going to do anything to start a business. Right. So that's a common issue across the board, not just in acupuncture, but in the Black community in general, trying to start small businesses.
That was a big question I wanted to ask you. So we all know that it's hard to go out and start a business for anyone, right? That's like a challenge that all acupuncturists face. But I wanted to ask you if you felt like there were obstacles that you faced because you're a Black woman, and if so, how did you deal with that, and how are you dealing with them?
Yes, money is always the biggest obstacle, because everything requires money in order to get into a decent space. So when I first started, I was in a one-room space that I rented through like a major corporation. It was called Boxer Properties. They make it really easy to rent commercial space with no credit checks and no huge deposits or anything like that. And it's already built to suit. And so that was really helpful. I started there and just worked. And as I grew, I saved the little money I had and then moved into a bigger space. And so here I'm renting a room from a friend. So, and it's not even like a clinical space. My friend has a hair studio and she has a room, and she's like, yeah, we can cross refer. I can definitely talk to my hair clients, and a lot of them are already super excited that you're coming. So that's how I'm starting. And as I build there and grow out of the one room space, I'll save my money, stack it up, and then rent something that's a little bit bigger and just grow in that way. I know there's no way that, especially I just moved, I just started working somewhere, it's part-time, like there's nowhere that I can go that anyone's gonna give me money to start a business. And I had an amazing business plan that I paid for when I was in Denver. And the woman that wrote it, had this dream that I was just going to go and present it and I would be able to get a loan. I was like, maybe in your world, but that's not going to happen. And it didn't. Even when I had my nonprofit and my business was within it, and I had 4 different businesses with amazing business plans, and we had our 501c3, I could barely get grant money. Wow. Because they were like, well, come back when you've had other people give you money. So in order to get larger grants, I had to find enough people to give me very small grants and show how I managed that money before we could get the larger grants. So basically, what I've learned is that you have to already have money for anybody to want to give you money. And I'm like, well, if I had money, then I wouldn't be asking for your money. So I'll just go chug away and work 2 to 3 jobs. So that's what I've done as an acupuncturist. I've always had backup jobs. During the pandemic, I was lucky enough that through doing community work, I was asked to work through DPS, and they created a position for me to work. So I was a community school coordinator to basically build programs to support schools. And that was still part of holistic work for me. And that sustained me and allowed me to save up money for this move and starting over.
Yeah, you've been doing so much. Running organizations, starting nonprofits, running your business. That's amazing. And that's, I think that's something we should be aware of, people who do have the privilege to have, even if we don't have family money be to us, there's systemic racism going on that if we write a really great business plan and take it to a credit union or a bank, probably easier to be given money. That's so frustrating.
It is, my family are immigrants, so there's no long history of owning anything. Like, people have newly bought properties after being in this country for years and years and working, in small jobs, labor jobs, and saving the money. But there's nothing to pass on, and there's definitely nothing that feels safe to be like, sure, we'll put this up against your money. Like, that's too much risk after so much hard work. So, yeah.
Can I ask you another thing that's sort of related to that? And it's like a sort of a pet peeve of mine in the business coaching world, where people are like, well, just manifest it and it will come, and that's it being, maybe your mindset and manifesting can help, but it's ignoring the fact that a whole lot of people don't have access to the same, privilege and money and opportunities as other people. And so, do you have any opinions about manifesting?
I think sometimes when I come across books with people talking about manifesting, if you look into the history of those people, they had some help with that manifesting, nothing is manifested out of thin air. And I am a person that is full of faith. I am definitely of the belief that you speak positivity, you speak into existence the things that you desire, but that comes with really hard work, at least in my experience. And so, people are often impressed that I'm doing so much, but I have to do so much because it's how I grow. even financially. So had I not been out volunteering my voice in community, I wouldn't have gotten the position that I got through DPS. I got it because I was out and present and people saw me and heard me. I wouldn't have clients if I wasn't out and talking to people and mingling at different places. And so where some people volunteer because they have privilege, right? They have money behind them. They can afford to give time. I'm volunteering when I could really be using that time to make money. Like I need to be making money in that time. But if I'm not making money, then I might as well be out volunteering. Does that make sense? Like I'm not making money anyway, so I'll show up here. I can't give you a donation to support what you're doing, but I can lend my voice. I can lend my, visionary mind to come up with creative ideas and connect you with other people that I've met along the way. And so through that, I manifest goodness because people give back to me because I've been giving. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sitting at home, saying Om, and then things are showing up at my doorstep.
Totally. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to ask you another question, kind of about cultural appropriation. I've been thinking a lot about it as a non-Asian practitioner of an East Asian medicine. And I wondered, and I sort of think you touched on this maybe earlier when you were talking about the erasure of Black contributions and how it kind of, you reminded us of how it's sort of this maybe global, I don't know, more global soup melting pot of what's become this holistic healing tradition. But I was wondering if, as a person of color who's walked through life, that's or walk through a world that's permeated with systemic racism, if you would maybe have a different or unique perspective on what it means to be a non-Asian practitioner of an East Asian medicine.
I think this came up at some point in a conversation with someone, but I absolutely feel that I have a connection to this medicine. If not specifically in the language and the direct approach that's taken by the Chinese, in that I know that my family practiced healing touch, healing medicine, herbal medicine. And I feel blessed to be able to study from a people that were able to maintain their records and their history and pass it on. I feel like when I'm doing my work, a lot of it is more intuitive. I don't necessarily always specifically approach things in the way that it was taught in school. And so the work is effective, even if I'm not following protocols in the way that it was given to me, right? So I'm practicing and I'm using the titles. I'm using acupuncturist. I'm using traditional Chinese medicine practitioner because that's what's recognizable. But those practitioners from China might not come into my room and recognize what I'm doing as what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I'm appropriating that. I have an entrance to access knowledge that has been lost to me, lost my lineage, and I'm practicing it in a way that my ancestors are guiding me to it.
I love the way you say that. Yeah.
I'm making it make sense. I'm not trying to take or twist it, but I am following my spirit and my intuition in what the person on the table needs. And I've often had people say, even before I get them on the table, just through the intake, through talking with them, I'm feeling better already. I've had people crying because I've just listened to them and I've repeated back what they've said and talked to them about these are the steps that I can take. And then their response is I already feel better before any acupuncture even happens.
Yeah.
So there's that piece. More broadly, my feelings about appropriation, especially in this country, is that there's a tendency to take just the pieces that feel good, even if that means leaving behind the people and their culture. And so I think you're in Acupuncturist on Facebook. And I've noticed a lot of conversations go quiet after I type the same reminder every time that When people are complaining about being excluded in insurance, or other people using, dry needling or whatever, and being compensated in a way that we're not. Like, sounds a whole lot like, how this country treats Black people. Like, our music is acceptable. The way that we speak is acceptable. If you don't know what I'm referring to, anyone that's listening, look at movies and television from the 80s. Look at all white shows and how people talk, and then listen to how people talk now. It's completely different. And the influence is definitely from the Black community. But, we're ignorant when we speak a certain way. And then when it becomes the mod culture, then it's just American culture. You know what I mean? And so I talk about how today, jazz and hip hop and all of these things are part of it's just American. That's American music. It's American culture. Acupuncture is accepted, right? But you still have Chinese Americans. I'm an African American, but jazz is American music, right? I'm not fully accepted because I have to be hyphenated, but anything that is adapted or incorporated into America from the people that I come from is fully American.
Yeah.
While I remain distant. I don't call myself African American. I'm Black. I just, I use that, and some people have issue with that too. But that's my reference, because I'm a bunch of different people all together. My presentation looks a certain way. I just go with Black. I don't like the hyphenation of African American. And if I were to accept it, I would say American African and not African American. So.
Thanks for sharing that. So what you're saying is you totally can identify with cultural appropriation from how American culture is just kind of borrowed, stolen from Black culture, while not honoring and giving credit to the people and the culture that it comes from. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. So, I'm just riding the wave of this interesting conversation, but I forgot to ask you, so you treat out of one room right now. What would it look like ideally, one room or two rooms? And what would be your ideal number of people to treat a week, do you think?
So my goal is really small because I don't need a lot. I honestly don't need a lot. My goal is to treat at least 6 people a day. It's a small goal.
I think it's a good goal.
Yeah, I really enjoy connecting with people. I really enjoy educating people. And I can't do that if I'm seeing more than that. I can't engage with people the way that I do, the way people engage, if I'm trying to see 3 to 4 people an hour. I had an opportunity to do that. There's a lovely place here in Tucson that was ready to hire me, but they want you to treat 3 to 4 people an hour. And to me, my mind immediately went to going to the emergency room, or my kid's pediatrician, and you're waiting in the room for however long, and then the doctor comes in and they're there 10-15 minutes, do their stuff, and then they're gone. And you spend more time with the nurse and the front desk than you do with the doctor.
Yeah,
I don't like that myself. So why would I want to be that for someone else? I appreciate being a listening ear for people and giving them feedback on where they can make improvements from, my staying in my lane, right? Giving them tools that they can take home with them, and then being with them in the space while they're on the table. And even if I see 2 people, I want at least 30 minutes with the first person, and then I can step out while they're resting on the table and give 30 minutes to another person, my sessions are about 45 to 50 minutes long, my follow-ups. And the needles are in about 30 minutes. So yeah, I would say 6 people in a day would help me reach my financial goals that I have. And that's allowing me to save, and take care of my monthly expenses and have money to invest. Like I don't need a whole lot.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that. Like, it's interesting because, I mean, you said you like had a little disclaimer yourself. You were like, it's a small goal, but I think that it's not. And the reason I want to like ask people on this podcast that question is because a lot of people like compare themselves to other people and assume they need like to see more and more and more. Whereas like almost everyone I've asked has like feels the same way as you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so none of us should feel like we need a disclaimer on our like goals that like, oh, it's just a small one. No, it's like perfect. And it's such a great way to practice, and you're like not alone at all. And that being like an ideal number, you know? Yeah. So I kind of just want people to talk about it more. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just some pretty strong voices that criticize people that have that as a goal. And I've even heard some say, you know, that anyone with those kinds of goals has no idea about business or what they need, you know? And I think that too is like a cultural difference. You know, there are some people who don't want to have kids, right? Are not connected with their families, but they have goals to own these huge properties. And it's like, why do you want to take up so much space? Why do you need or want all of that, and you're not going to share it with anyone? I don't resonate with that culturally. It doesn't feel good to me to like have a whole bunch that I don't need when there's people out there that need just a little bit, you know? So for what my family needs, for the amount of space that I want to take up, 6 people per day for 5 days a week meets my goals.
Yeah, perfect. And it's such good self-awareness and self-knowledge to like know that. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. It feels like a very like, I don't know, like hyper masculine, capitalistic, like patriarchal like view of things. And it's so sad if that's permeated such a wonderful like healing profession, you know? Which is why I appreciate having honest conversations with people. Yeah, thank you. Did you experience the imposter syndrome? Did you or do you?
I do, but not specifically in Chinese medicine. Like I feel really comfortable here in this zone and sharing this information. I feel it oddly enough more with just adulting because I still feel like my kid self, you know. I can be kind of silly sometimes when I'm not in a professional setting. And so I feel it in that way. Like sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm like really doing this, you know, like I got like a business going on. But even though I owned my first business at 19, like I still feel that way. And then I get it a lot just in speaking. And sometimes I'm disappointed in myself because I'll be with like a new friend or something and I'm still using this voice. So this is not my natural voice. This is not how I naturally speak.
What do you mean?
And so like I don't talk like this.
Yeah.
Not my pitch or tone, just the words that I'm using. It's very like it takes a lot, so I can get really tired sometimes. So I got tired in school, for example, and I had a breakdown in class. I was like, I'm just so tired. Like my jaw is physically tired from having to place my mouth a certain way to enunciate the words so that y'all can understand me. And they were like, well, what do you mean? Just talk how you normally talk. And I was like, no, because y'all ain't gonna understand me. And you're gonna be like, what did she say? And they were like, wait, what? I was like, exactly. So, you know, I have to speak in a certain way. And so there have been times where with I Am For Us, for example, I talk about them a lot because I spent a lot of time with them in the last year or so. But I told them that, you know, sometimes meetings are exhausting for me because I have to use so many more words than I would just normally use in order to be careful of how everything is presented, so no one perceives that I'm upset about something, or so that they can hear me and not my dialect, you know? And so there's imposter syndrome in that often when I'm sharing, I know it's not my voice. Like it's a put on voice that I'm using to express myself that I don't use when I'm talking with my patients that are from my community. I do put it on for, patients that are not from the Black community, or if it's a Black person, but they seem like that's where they're comfortable at, then I stay there with them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So it's not like imposter syndrome, like I'm not good enough or I don't belong here, but like you're not allowed to be your like true full, you can't show up as your full, real self.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes work and is probably, really exhausting.
Mm-hmm. And people argue that,
that.
no, that's not necessary. And I'm like, you're able to say that because you've already put me in the box of, okay, she's intelligent and she has something to say. If I introduce myself naturally, then there wouldn't be that opportunity first. In fact, when I teach the NADA protocol, I have a slide that I use that just has all of these words that describe me at some point in time, like work that I've done. And it's all these different things. And people are like, oh my God, what? You did what? Bus driver, what? Security guard, like all these things that I've done. And I'm like, you would never guess that. And if I spoke the way that I naturally speak, people would be like, shh. Because there's this tendency, like we naturally classify things because that's what happens internally. Our body classifies and organizes things. These cells do this work and they belong over there. These kind of cells belong here. Oh, those cells are out of place, right? Everything naturally organizes and differentiates. And so we do the same externally. Mm-hmm. And so people just place you in a box. And so I often get, and it's, people don't realize they're being insulting, but it's extremely insulting. Like I've been on a plane, for example, and, there's some older gentleman. Oh, and what do you do? Oh, I'm an acupuncturist. Oh, what do you do for that? And like, well, I did this, and, I got my doctorate degree. So you're a doctor. Wow. Well, good for you. Wow. Yeah, good for you. And I'm like,
that's so demeaning. Yeah. They think they're giving you a compliment, but it's like, belittling.
Yes. And so that's why I have to speak the way that I do, at least initially. And then people are like, no, just be yourself. And I go back because they just, if I go off and just talk, you'll miss a lot because it's just a different dialect. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad to know that. Before I ask you just like a couple quick fire questions, do you have anything, is there anything else you want to share?
No, just a final piece on that. Like I do get tired with the speaking, but I'm a polyglot. I speak 3 other languages plus patois anyway. Wow. And so I know a lot of people don't use this type of language, but I would love to see people recognize the way that people speak as different dialects instead of, slang or whatever other more demeaning ways of recognizing how people talk, like it's a dialect.
It's a dialect. It's not like less educated or slang. It's like, a different dialect. Yeah. I think that's a good point. Thanks. What element do you think you are? 5 elements.
I am so torn between fire and wood. And it's like both in my face and my hands. Because I'm like, well, my fingers are really long, but I feel like they're the same length. Maybe it's like the palm of my hand. So I don't know. Yeah.
I could see that.
When I was younger, I would definitely have been more fire.
Yeah.
So I was hot. Like not in the physical way, but just like
mental. Yeah.
Hot. Yes.
Yeah. Totally. I see that.
I feel like I'm a lot more calm, more chill now that I've had kids and everything.
Yeah. Do you have like a TCM hero?
Dr. Shakur. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the work that they did, do you know that they started a school?
No.
There was an acupuncture school founded by Dr. Shakur and other Black Panthers in New York. that coincided with all of that work in the early days of NADA, where they were teaching people from the community to be acupuncturists. And some of those people, I know at least 2 men that are still practicing.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Dr. Dandridge, I think she interviewed one of them, and the other one has taken me on as a mentee.
Wow.
That are still practicing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Is there a movie about that?
Dope is Death.
Dope is Death. Okay, I need to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't, I've seen a couple though, because NADA has a few videos, and I can't remember if it was in Dope is Death or if it was in this other video that I watched that they actually show footage from the school.
Okay. I want to check.
Yeah.
I want to know more about it, so I'm going to have to check it out. Cool.
Yeah, it's a really good film. Really well done.
Awesome. And do you just like, is it like on YouTube, or like how do you know where to find it?
I'll send you the link, and maybe you can
and then
share
I can
the
share
link
it
later.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. One last question. What do you eat for breakfast?
So I kind of do intermittent fasting.
Well, thank you so much. Will you let people know how they can connect with you, where they can connect with you, like your website?
Yes, absolutely. I'm all over social media at Blacupuncturist, and that's the word acupuncturist with BL in front, so there's no K in it. At Blacupuncturist on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And my website is blacupuncturist.me. So BLACUPUNCTURIST.me.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Rhonda, for taking the time to
Thank
share with
you,
us.
Katie.
It's so great to connect with you, and
so great to connect.
You're doing awesome things. So
thank you so much. You were one of my favorite instructors. So
oh, thank you so much.
I always talk about you.
Oh, thanks. Makes me happy. Well, good luck with like settling into your move and everything. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is awesome.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
I hope that as you work to make the world a better place, you also prosper, my friend.